I gotta get the high sign. Okay. I see the red sign.
Recording in progress.
We good? Okay. This is the Planning Commission hearing of April 4th, 2024 at 7 p.m. in the Commission Chambers, the Lipke Public Safety Building at 1234 Lynn Avenue. And can we call the roll?
Commissioner LaSalle.
Here.
Commissioner Schlagenhofer.
Here.
Commissioner Laws.
Here.
Commissioner Dole.
Here.
Commissioner West.
Here.
Chair Stoll.
Here.
Vice Chair Espy.
Here. Okay, so for the first item, we have a public comment. Is anybody here to make any public comments that are not related to any of the agenda items this evening? Hearing none, we have the presentations. We have the update on the Parks Master Plan from the Parks Master Plan consultant. Thank you.
Hi, Planning Commissioners. So Kendall Reed is our Park and Recreation Director, and he will introduce our consultants. And this topic came up as a result of your discussions on your work plan and wanting to know more about the Park and Recreation Master Plan and kind of how it accommodates for growth. And so they're in the midst of doing that update. And so we had the opportunity to have Kendall and his consultants give you this presentation.
Excellent. Thank you.
All right. Thanks for having me. My name is Kendall Reed. I'm the Parks and Recreation Director for Oregon City. And tonight it's my pleasure to introduce Nilay Bhatt from Next Practice Partners. Nilay Bhatt and Jason Elisalde have worked with us since we kicked off this plan back in April of 2022. We've had an exhaustive process of public engagement that is still ongoing, and we have several additional public engagement meetings planned and updates planned for other committees. And tonight he will be providing an update on our Parks Master Plan as to kind of where we are and where we see us heading in the future. Nilay?
Great. Good afternoon, everybody. In case anyone's also following along, the score is Purdue 30 and UConn 32.
I'm sorry, Neely, can you hold on just a second? Neely, can you hold on just a second? We're trying to adjust the volume. We're having a kind of a hard time.
Sure.
Okay, do you want to test it?
Yeah, can you hear me now?
It is really quiet. Give us 1 minute here.
Sure. Those online, can you hear me? Thumbs up?
Yes.
Okay. So I know it's not on my end.
Yeah, I think it's our system, so we're just playing with the levels a little bit. All right, you want to test it again?
Sure. Can you hear me now?
Yes, better, thank you.
Better, yeah.
Okay. So I said as I joined in case you didn't hear me, the score is Purdue 30 and UConn 32. I am in Indiana, so this is a big deal right now. Anyways, Kendall, thank you for the introduction. Is anyone there able to share the screen, or do you want me to share the presentation from my screen?
We can share it.
Perfect. All right. Here we go. All right. So as Kendall mentioned, this is about a couple years in as well, really in the very end of the process here. But if you go to the next slide, please. At a very high level, these are the three major steps in the planning process. All of you have been through this, so I'm not going to give you a spiel on a master plan and all that. You know it. You obviously do a ton of this as well. But the key focus, as you see on the next slide here, was about the community values and engagement. And a big part of our focus throughout is going where the community is, in person, online, websites, surveys, etc. And all in all, see on the following slide, we had input from over 700 participants across the city. More than half of them came from a statistically valid survey responses as well. That included just your community residents, controlled for a random sampling, And I'm going to share some of the survey findings here. In addition to that, community-wide meetings, focus groups, key leaders, online survey, website, all the rest really complemented the process. In addition to that, we were also assessing staffing levels and program assessments, as you see on the next slide. And you can move to the one right after that. We looked at the following 8 core program areas that Kendall and his team helped identify. Everything from aquatics to events to fitness to culture, enrichment, community services, all the rest were also looked at. And parallel to that, and this is really where a lot of the work we do will overlap with the work I know you're already working on, which is identifying and documenting on the next slide, please, the levels of service and the equity maps. This is where we had Kendall and the team help identify the city providers for a variety of park types, trails, outdoor and indoor amenities. And then we also documented and captured input from other service providers, specifically the schools, and of course, weighed them based on access to the community to allow for a more appropriate depiction of utilization, not just the availability of or the existence of the space. That led to the current level of service based on existing population. The recommended service levels, though, are based on an entirely Oregon City customized standard. There isn't really a statewide number. There isn't a national number as well. I've been on the board of the National Rec and Park Association for several years. It's really, really hard, especially in the West Coast and the Pacific Northwest, to look at, a number of these amenities as one might look at in the Midwest, for example, both in terms of simply availability of land or simply the very cost of acquiring and developing. So with that in mind, what you see is over the next 10 years, the 4 or 5 areas that show where needs exist. And those are some of the key things in terms of neighborhood parks, trail miles, a couple of pickleball courts, and indoor, aquatic/recreation space in particular. And this is simply in terms of quantity. There are also things that we know in terms of spaces that you have, whether it's your pool or the end of the Oregon Trail, the EOT, that you, from a life cycle standpoint, are either at capacity and you know that they need a lot of investment and updates. In addition to the quantity, the next slide talks about equity of access. And this is where, using GIS-based mapping, we've developed service areas based on the standard we have for every amenity type. I'm showing you a couple of examples here. This is playgrounds. You can see on the top right, the standard of one site for 2,500 people. And the service area rings essentially go out in a concentric circle till they capture 2,500. Clearly a lot of overlaps in several areas. If you look at the next map, which is pickleball courts, that's where you'll see there are a few gaps because primarily everything you have currently is at Hill and Dale. The third example here, the following map, is with trails. And this is where it's helpful to see the other providers so you have a better sense in terms of regional connectivity, and where, if you think in terms of a 10-minute walk to a park access or 10-minute walk to a trail in the future, what might be ways to maximize development and connectivity to help allow for that. All of this came from the next couple of slides, which are the priority investment rating. If you go to the next slide, please. This came from the survey data with the statistically valid survey. This is a combination of what people say is important, what they say is a need, and which needs are unmet or met at only 50% or less. So that's where you can see paved and unpaved trails, water access, an amphitheater, walking, jogging track, community park, open space conservation, dog park, aquatics, neighborhood parks are your top 9 or 10 really. And those are the ones that have the highest mix of either things that are really important or things that are a higher unmet need currently that the community would like you to prioritize as well. Now, the same exercise was also done for all the programs. And if you look at the next slide, this is where you can see as well, 3 of the top 5 are, events or gatherings or opportunities that bring the community together, from farmers market to special events to cultural enrichment programs and events. The other two are fitness and wellness, both based in terms of adult or senior fitness and wellness, closely followed by nature camps. And given the historic nature of Oregon City, historic preservation is significantly higher than I see in many other places. So these priorities help shape the recommendations and the maps that you saw as well. And with all this information, then we had, multiple iterative workshops and processes with Kendall and his team to go to the visioning process. If you go on the next slide, please. And it started with, firstly, the values. And these were the core values that the team came about and said, this is what is going to shape and guide how we do things going forward. Being collaborative, engaged, respectful, transparent, and servant leaders. In addition to that, the thought of what do we want to be known for? What is our vision for the future? And that on the next slide, as you can see, what the staff and team agreed to is to be known as an inclusive, sustainable, which is both fiscally and environmentally sustainable, and an impactful agency. And the mission, what is it that we want and exist to do, is to serve the community. A lot of these vision mission statements we typically see tend to be a word salad of a couple words that everyone on the committee likes. So everyone sees something in there, but nobody actually remembers it. And so we really emphasize brevity in this process and something that can resonate with everybody, whether it's a 30-year veteran of the department or, a fresh lifeguard as well. That might be joining the team. So now with this in mind, we have the last couple of slides here to say, okay, this is great. What are the major outcomes that we want to have achieved from this plan over the next 5 to 10 years? And as you look at these, exploring diverse revenue opportunities, a citywide fiscal policy for dedicated funding, advertising, sponsorship, grants, a bond or levy, utility fees, updating fees and charges in SDCs, which is a parallel plan that's already happening. There's not one single opportunity from this as much as we recognize a combination of all of these that are going to be required. At the same time as you grow, the focus on the staffing element as well. So the internal resources grow at the same time, both in terms of retaining who you have, recruiting future candidates, and looking at succession planning and training and development. Kendall's already working on these elements with the facility division, but looking at maintenance management plans, being able to plan for future capital improvements and development, preventive measures, equipment replacement, and so on. One of the biggest challenges we see in park and rec agencies, and that came out high in the survey in Oregon City too, was the thought around telling your story. And we don't do a very good job. In fact, 1 in 3 people actually don't come to your parks or programs nationally because they don't know what is being offered. And that's not the department's fault as much as it's just the nature of how much is out there, how much people are bombarded by news, advertising, etc. And so investing in dedicated planning, staffing for marketing, social media, branding, all of those are really critical. And then, looking at master business planning for the EOT, the cemetery, and the pool as well are some of the big outcomes that came out of the visioning process with the staff. And as you can see, it's both physical infrastructure and human capital that's being prioritized as a part of this. So the last slide was really talking in terms of implementation steps to say, what are some of the key next steps that should be immediately undertaken to help work towards these outcomes? And it's really starting with the master business plans for the EOT and the cemetery, a feasibility study for the pool to say, where you are, is that the best place? And if so, what does that look like if you expand? Or do you need to be elsewhere? Your SDCs, based on the report findings, is that something that can be updated? What could a utility fee assessment potentially look like? Is there support for a bond or referendum as well for capital projects that the community has prioritized? And what are those other public-private partnership opportunities, utilizing the foundations, utilizing external entities to help support the implementation? So that's where we are right now. The next steps is, as we go through this process with you all, the PRAC, and eventually to the council, if you look at the last slide here, is to continue to get feedback. Kendall has already seen the draft report. It is with the city manager's office as well. We're going to be there in May for community presentations and ultimately moving towards the final report adoption and thus the implementation. So I've said quite a bit. I'm going to pause and turn it over to you all for any questions or comments that you may have. And you can move the last couple of slides if you'd like as well, please.
Is the planning commission invited to make comments at this point?
Right, this is informational and question time for Kendall and the consultant.
Okay. So why don't we go from west to east and go down the line about any comments that you might have? Bob? Dirk?
I have nothing.
Carla?
Nothing.
Yeah, no comment. Just appreciate the effort, sharing the information.
So the only thing that I noticed was,
And just a reminder, this is hard in hybrid meetings, but we have two commissioners online, so if they have comments or
thank you.
questions.
Yeah. And Greg, Commissioner Stoll,
I don't. Thank you, though.
and Commissioner West?
No, I don't have any questions. Thank you for presenting that. I appreciate the update.
Yes, thanks. Yeah, thanks for all of your work on that as well. The only thing that I would think, and I wasn't sure if I heard it or saw it in the plan, but just to identify ways by which additional acquisition of land, parkland, should always be, and then looking at all of the master plans that we have that identify parklands in them, and hopefully targeting some of those areas for future land acquisition. This will be the only things that I would like to hopefully see in the report, so that those kinds of things. Not only are we maintaining our existing, but we're also reaching out to find additional territory for future parks.
Kendall, may I comment on that?
Yes, please.
I appreciate your point as well, Commissioner, and yes, the report will have that through the equity maps, similar to what I showed you with the playgrounds or the pickleball courts. We also have a similar thing for neighborhood parks or community parks, where you can see the gaps and overlaps in park access. And as we have this deficit of about 29 acres in total over the next 10 years, those maps, the level of service, will definitely help staff further identify either land that you have that needs to be developed, or, as you mentioned rightly so, potential acquisition opportunities as well, where they might exist too. So your point's well taken, and that's certainly something we will be mindful of through the report.
That's fantastic. And so we don't have any further action. This is just for an informational check-in, and we can move on to the next agenda item. And thank you very much for all of your great work on this. This is great.
Yeah, thank you.
Staff's been fantastic, so thank you all.
So for the next item, we have the meeting minutes. The meeting minutes are for approval of February 26, 2024. And do any of the commissioners have comments for those minutes? We have a motion to approve.
I move to approve the February 26, 2024 minutes.
It's moved for approval by Commissioner LaSalle,
Second.
and seconded by Dirk Schlagenhofer. Okay, for the next,
Need a vote?
oh, I'm sorry, yeah.
Commissioner LaSalle,
Aye.
Commissioner Schlagenhofer,
Aye.
Commissioner Laws. Aye. Commissioner Dole,
Aye.
Commissioner West,
Aye.
Chair Stoll,
Aye.
Vice Chair SB.
Aye. Very good. So for the next item, we have a public hearing, and that is GLUA 23-00038, LN 23-040 and a 5, CI 2023-4001, Lithia Subaru, code interpretation and non-conforming land use review. So this is a quasi-judicial application, and public hearings on land use applications are scheduled for tonight, and our role is to conduct the public hearing to make decisions about the matter before us. In making those decisions, we must apply applicable codes and laws and cannot vary from or change those laws or codes. A staff report has been prepared for the application and has been made available to the public 7 days before the first public hearing. The staff report identifies the approval criteria that apply to each applicant's proposal, or just the one this evening. Staff has analyzed the criteria which are contained in the staff report, and the hearing procedure that the Planning Commission will follow is set out in state law and the Oregon City Municipal Code. The steps are shown on the Planning Commission website. Public testimony will be called in the order it was requested. If you wish to testify in person, please fill out a speaker card available at the back of the room. If you wish to testify virtually, you will be called either from a request to speak emailed to city staff at the appropriate website in advance of this meeting, or by raising your virtual or physical hand when I ask if there are any others in the audience who would like to participate. For the public record, please begin all testimony stating your name and the city of residence. If you would like to receive a copy of the notice of decision, please state your mailing address or email address. Testimony and evidence should be directed toward the applicable approval criteria. If you believe other criteria apply in addition to those addressed in the staff report, identify and discuss those criteria and explain how and why you believe they apply to this application. Any person may submit written material while the public record is open. On each application, any written materials received by the city staff during the time period in which the record is open will be placed in the record. Written materials submitted during the public hearing must be presented to city staff in order to become part of the record. If a person wishes to use PowerPoint presentations, reports, pictures, or other types of evidence in their oral testimony, it needs to be placed in the record. Copies must be submitted to city staff while the record is still open. If they're not given to staff during that time, they will not be included in the record. Any person wishing a continuance to present additional evidence and testimony, or to keep the record open to respond to new evidence, must make that request before the public testimony portion of the initial hearing is closed. If the Planning Commission makes a decision in which you disagree, any issues that you may wish to appeal must have been raised before the Planning Commission in order to be considered by the City Commission, and in the event of further appeal, Land Use Board of Appeals. Without raising the issue on the record with sufficient detail and accompanied by statements or evidence allowing the city and all parties to respond, the issue will not be considered on appeal. In addition to participating orally or in writing and raising all issues during the Planning Commission proceeding, the file of an appeal must include the required fee. A city-recognized neighborhood association may request a waiver of an appeal fee subject to the requirements set forth in the Oregon City Code, 1750-190C5 and 1750-290C. In addition, the failure of an applicant to raise the constitutional or other issues relating to the proposed conditions of approval with sufficient detail to allow the local government or its designee to respond to the issue precludes an action for damages in circuit court. Now we will open the record for Oregon City File GLUA 230038 LN 234005 CI 234001 Lithia Subaru code interpretation of a land use review. And then further members of the Planning Commission are to be unbiased, and as a result, I will call on each of the commissioners to disclose any potential conflicts, such as family, financial, or business relationships with any of the applicants or with regards to this application. I'll also ask whether the Planning Commissioners have discussed the application in question, and if the parties or have independent knowledge of relevant facts, such as from a site visit, or any member of the audience may question, a Planning Commissioner about their disclosures that they provide this evening. At this point, I will just go ahead again from west to east, and I will ask if any of the commissioners have any conflicts of interest, ex parte, contact bias, or any other statements to declare, or if they visited the site. And if there was a site visit, Planning Commission needs to declare whether or not what he or she perceived. And so we will go ahead, start with Commissioner LaSalle.
I have no bias or conflict of interest. I've passed by the location several times, and I have a friend that bought a auto from them with positive results.
I have no ex parte contact. I have no bias. I have no conflicts of interest. As far as a site visit, I did not go to the site for this application, but I've been there dozens of times to buy parts. I know the service area well. I know the parts area well. I know it's getting down there is kind of funky, and I think this could improve it a lot. So I'm very curious to see what they have to say. Thank you.
Along with Commissioner Schlagenoff, I've also done lots of business with Lithia Subaru. We own Subarus and we have them repaired, not on a regular basis, fortunately, but we do have them repaired at that business, and we've been very happy with results.
The only, any bias or conflict of interest is I bought a Subaru from them in 2021. I get my maintenance and repairs there. I volunteer as a secretary for Oregon City Parks Foundation, so they donate bottles to us, and they volunteered for an ivy cleaning this weekend. And the only other thing I would say is I went to the Two Rivers Neighborhood Association meeting where they presented at the tail end of their land use. They were just presenting to them. I saw the very end of it, barely anything. And that would be the only conflict of interest, no other conflict of interest or any bias.
No bias on my end, no ex parte conflict or conflict of interest. I drive by the site all the time. I do have family members who have purchased vehicles from you with all good experiences. Interested to hear about your plans.
Does anybody in the audience wish to question or challenge any of the...
Okay. Two more online.
Right, I'm sorry. Gosh, these hybrid meetings just kill me. Okay, Commissioner Stoll.
I have no bias, no ex parte contact, no conflict of interest. I drive by it on a regular basis, and that's it.
Commissioner West?
I have no conflict of interest, no ex parte contact, no bias, and I come into Oregon City from the freeway regularly on 14th Street. So I didn't do a special drive-by for tonight, but I drive by regularly.
Excellent. Now I'll ask if anyone in the audience wishes to question the planning commissioners about their conflicts or biases. Hearing none, we will go ahead and commence with the staff report from Christina Robinson-Gardner. Thank you, Christina, for all of your great work on the report, and look forward to your presentation.
All right, thank you, planning commissioners. Let's get the presentation started. Oh, take your time. So while we're getting this ready, this is similar to a request from Lithia Subaru that came in 2018. So there are a couple commissioners who were in the 2018. So this is just a different variation of that. The reason why these code interpretations come to the Planning Commission is there's a little bit of discretion involved in planning staff doing this analysis at a type 2 level through site plan and design review. So like the 2018 process, we really recommended the applicant to bifurcate it. First, go in front of the Planning Commission to present the proposal to request a finding that there's no intensification or expansion of the use. And then really you're sending them, if you agree and approve this, you are sending them back down to the traditional type 2 site plan and design review process. This allows them more certainty and not having to really put together a full outlay application without really knowing the answer from the Planning Commission. So I put this right up front to just kind of set the stage of really what you're looking for this evening. You really have kind of two options, although if there's a third, if you have a different alternative approach, let staff and the applicant know, and we can work with you on that. But generally, if the Planning Commission finds that the increase in the service bays and parts storage does not constitute an expansion or intensification of the pre-existing non-conforming use, then the applicant will submit for a type 2 site plan design review and move through that type 2 process for a development review application. If the Planning Commission determines that the increase in service bays and part storage will expand and intensify the pre-existing non-conforming use, the applicant will maintain the current configuration and then determine what parts of the application really were either previously permitted, like the fleet storage area from 2018, or are just a permitted use like office, or just covering an existing area like the service drive. So they could parcel a smaller application that maybe is more permitted through the type 2 process. So more importantly, your job tonight is not to be site plan design review. This has not been reviewed for individual analysis if there's enough window openings, or did Public Works sign off on the driveway location, or what street improvements would be required. That's all going to be done in the type 2 site plan and design review process. So just in general, let me go to the next slide. So this is a pre-existing non-conforming use. Lithia purchased the site from Thomas & Auto Group in 2003. This area was previously zoned light industrial and then commercial into the 70s and 80s. The light industrial zone of M1 allowed all uses in the C2 commercial zone, which allowed car dealerships. So in 2009, the city provided the official kind of pre-existing non-conforming use confirmation. So that's the LN09, which said, yes, we agree, based on what you submitted, that there has been a car dealership here when it was a permitted use. You are now considered a pre-existing non-conforming use. Today, in our mixed-use downtown, a new car dealership would not be a permitted use. So here's a little background of why this application is in front of you this evening. The city does not have a clear definition for the term expansion or intensification. So in our pre-existing non-conforming code, we say that these uses should not be expanded or intensified. We don't have a definition of expansion or intensified, so that's why we're here this evening. In 2018, the Planning Commission did look at a new structured parking garage on the site to provide more access to the fleet storage. And that was approved by the Planning Commission. And actually, the Planning Commission at the time did, through their deliberations, added very specific language related to supporting the urbanization of that lot. And they found that this structured fleet parking actually helped to promote the urbanization of the lot, and found that it was not a pre-existing non-conforming expansion or intensification. And once again, the original approval of the non-conforming use was in 2009. Let's see. So here's some overview of staff's findings. In general, the mixed-use downtown zone prohibits new car dealerships. But what do we do with car dealerships that have been here for many, many decades? What happens to a long-standing business located within the city center that is no longer permitted? How can businesses invest and grow before it is considered a different use from what was originally there when the zoning code was amended? That's the nut the Planning Commission is here to crack and provide direction to staff. Reviewing a proposal based on a transportation system impact doesn't necessarily provide an adequate assessment of the intent of the non-conforming code. Like any one new service bay could potentially add a trip, but there are a lot of permitted uses in the mixed-use downtown zone that would potentially add a lot more trips than the service bay. So looking at it on a transportation kind of might send you down a path that may not provide the level of analysis that asks the larger question of, is this an expansion or intensification of that car dealership use that was originally originally a permitted use. So staff really looked at this as the use, not necessarily the site, but as the use expanded or intensified. So there's no new components to the existing car dealership being added to the site, like a rental car service or a detailing or modification shop. No new tax lots have been added to the site. There's always been service associated with an auto dealership, even from the beginning. And there's always been some storage of parts. So there's no new use proposed with this. The addition of new service bays remain on the same block as the existing service bays. Reviewing the full proposal allows for a more holistic view of the development on site instead of parsing out specific uses within the proposal. So really you're looking at kind of what Subaru is proposing this evening, which is a modernization of their car dealership, which involves additional office space, additional service bays, some additional parts area, implementing an approved fleet structured parking area from 2018, and covering an existing service area. So it's kind of, you can look at the whole package too in your analysis. And really on balance, there is an investment in the site that brings a more urban form from the downtown and removes some of the existing outside storage, which is not an allowed use in the downtown. You know, you couldn't build new outdoor storage in our downtown area. So just a couple slides showing the location and existing condition and some of the proposed elevations. These are the two tax lots associated with this proposal. The applicant has not submitted the other tax lots related to the fleet parking. Those aren't going to change across the street from Main Street. There's two tax lots on this block that are part of this application, and they bound 14th and 15th in Main and technically Center Street, which is underneath the railroad trestle. Here's some Google Street views showing existing conditions, and I added the arrows, I think, just to, if there's any question about the kind of depression area that kind of is below grade, that is where that structured parking will be, and then the service bays will be on top of that, which will be at grade at the Main Street elevation. So where you see, I put an arrow at 15th Street that kind of shows that depression. And then the arrow on Main Street, kind of right behind the cars you see there, would be the service bays, which would be at grade of Main Street. This is the applicant's proposal. What you see is that second story of the office space, and then to the left is the entrance to the service bays. And so in general, their kind of put together proposal is building the previously approved structured parking, enclosed an existing service drive, adding additional office space, increasing the number of service bays from 21 to 35, and expanding the parts storage from 4,050 square feet to about 9,220 square feet. Oops. This shows just the main floor, kind of showing in pink are kind of those areas that really I think the Planning Commission can be looking at a little bit more analysis on, which is that the service bays and the parts storage, but really can look at the whole proposal as one. So staff has provided some conditions of approval. Hold on one second. I cannot read that because I am getting older, so let me go to this so I can see. So the conditions you see in front of you, all right, let me zoom in, okay. So the first condition really just explicitly says what the Planning Commission is approving if you wish to approve this application. Condition number 2 specifies that you did not perform a site plan design review analysis as part of this, and that was not part of this approval. Number 3 is really writing for staff's support. Oftentimes, when we have an upper level approval that gets sent back down to site plan design review, and something has to tweak, like an access driveway changes, and that pushes something this way, and then we're looked at it, we're like, well, they went, the parts storage was 100 more square feet. Did the planning commission approve that? And so what this condition really says is, really you have kind of, if the proposed number of service bays or parts storage area increases by more than 5%, a new proposal in front of the planning commission needs to occur for you to do that analysis of, is it still a not expansion or intensification of use? Really, this just allows, if there's a small change in the square footage or location at the type 2 site plan design review level, we don't have to send it back to the planning commission. It's just a little bit of space to allow the inevitable things that happen when you actually get into a development review and small things get tweaked. And then we have clear direction. We don't need to go back to the planning commission. And then we have clear direction when we do have to go back to the planning commission. And then finally, this just provides the process and a time limit. We realized in 2018 we didn't have an expiration date. And because this analysis is really based on a specific proposal, condition number 4 identifies that this interpretation is limited within 5 years the date of this decision, and that really lines up with our site plan design review development expiration date. And so this means that the applicant has 5 years from this decision to submit and build the project as was proposed in front of you this evening. They can't come back 10 years from now and move forward with the development. So that's, one more. So really your options this evening, approve the application with conditions recommended by staff, approve the application with conditions modified by the Planning Commission, and I can work with you on any questions you may have, and we can amend any of these conditions if you want to, and do not approve the application. Alternatively, if there's something you really need from the applicant can, we can move to continue this application and, provide a 120-day extension if that's something that the Planning Commission wants to do. So I'm available for any questions the Planning Commission has. I know the applicant does have a presentation, and they're also here to answer questions.
Are there any questions? Staff? No?
Is there any difference between the proposed application and the one that was approved previously?
Yeah, one was approved previously was just the fleet storage structured parking. This is the expansion of the addition of service bays, so adding more service bays and adding more parts storage.
So we're here to approve or disapprove a non-conforming use.
Right, you're here, well, no, the non-conforming use still exists. What you're here as a planning commission is whenever a non-conforming use comes in, we open up the non-conforming chapter and say, yep, you're an acknowledged non-conforming use. Either we do a new analysis or we cite the previous one. In this situation, in 2009, it was identified as a pre-existing non-conforming use. Then we look at the next section which says, these uses should not be intensified or expanded. But what we don't have is definition. You can't look up Chapter 1704 expansion. How do we define that? That's why we're deferring to you as planning commissioner through a public hearing. Do you find this as an expansion or intensification of the use, the car dealership use?
And since this is quite an extensive remodel or reconstruction or whatever, this site is in the floodplain. What kinds of things do they have to do to conform to the floodplain code?
Sure, through Chapter 1762. I don't know if all portions of this lot are in the floodplain. Some may be, and so they're subject to, that's administered by our building official, most of the floodplain, but it does look at balance, cut and fill, and then flow controls and where you put the HVAC or any kind of electrical systems, but that really is done at the building permit and the site plan and design review level.
Anybody else?
That's all I had. That's all I had.
All right.
I
Commissioner
have a
Stoll?
quick question.
Commissioner Stoll? Do you have a question?
Yes, the previous approval doesn't have an expiration date, so if this gets approved, does it supersede or delete that, or is that still in effect going forward?
That's a really good legal question. I think our initial findings was, and there's on cue, our City Attorney Vilka Weisman, because it doesn't have an expiration date, I think we would work with our city attorney to determine, but right now, I think we believe it is a valid decision, but we would work with our city attorney to verify that.
The current permit would remain in effect to the extent there are any changes that result from this new approval. Those new approvals would supersede the previous ones, but those pieces that aren't changed would remain in effect.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner West, I don't see a hand up, and I don't see your image on my screen, but I want to make sure that...
I'm here and I have no questions.
Okay, great. All right, well, let's hear from the applicant if they have a presentation.
Good evening. My name is Chris Koback, K-O-B-A-C-K, and I'm with the law firm of Hathaway Larson. I reside and work in Bend, Oregon. My firm has an office in Portland and Cooch Street as well. Before I make some introductions, I wanted to thank Chair Stoll, Vice Chair Espy, and the commissioners for having us here and giving us the time to make a presentation on this national championship evening. Hopefully we can make it through the rest of the hearing without any more spoilers on the score for those of us who are taping the game. So the gentleman to my right is Ira Jones. He's the general manager of the current dealership. He's here really just for any questions you may have. He knows the on-the-ground stuff. I have Ann Breck from Lithia headquarters in Medford here. We have Jason Arturo. He's the project architect. He'll be more relevant if we get what we've asked for tonight from y'all and we go to site plan review. But he's here to answer any questions you may have on what the vision is going forward if we get to the next step. We have Dan Sanders, who actually is going to have to build it if we come out of this the way we hope we do. And then we have Scott Walker. He's with an engineering firm here, a local engineering firm. And again, his role will be hopefully more prominent if we can get through this step. Okay. So with those introductions, let me introduce Lithia. You heard a little bit, Lithia bought this dealership in 2003. I erroneously stated in my letter to you that it was 2002, so that's on me. Lithia prides itself on being a long-term member of this community. You know, we put in our letter some of the things Lithia has done. You know, they've been a solid business. They pride themselves on being a solid business for this community, employing people, being active in the community, and just being a general overall positive contributor to Oregon City. And they perceive the city has reciprocated in a number of ways. You've heard from Ms. Robertson-Gardner about some of the prior approvals that we've obtained for incremental enhancements to the current dealership, which is an old dealership. That building, I guess, has been there since the 50s. We have just anecdotal information about that. But these incremental enhancements have been positive and help Lithia give good service to the local community. But what we're here for today is the goal is to kind of continue this relationship. And the way Lithia perceives that is to be the best dealership it can be nowadays in the modern era where car dealers and car buying has changed. They need to look at this as a more comprehensive approach. And so that's why in 2018, when we got the approval for putting a second story on that depression, that's really what kind of triggered the relook at this and say, well, do we really want to continue to do these incremental enhancements, or is it better to take a step back and figure out, if we're going to be here long term and we really want to be in Oregon City for a long time, what do we need to do? And so that's what we're here for. As I said, the goal will be achieved ultimately, assuming the commission agrees with us tonight, through site plan review. And there will be a lot of detail presented from Jason and his team and Scott Walker on the details. What we're here to do today is ask you for an interpretation that what we want to do is this comprehensive enhancement is not an intensification or expansion of a non-conforming use, because your code states that that's not allowed. And so with that, I wanted to talk to you a little bit about the details of what the plan is. So Ms. Gardner did a great job of giving you the basics. We're the administrative building will have a second story. The first, what that allows is, a lot of the administrative stuff, the finance people, the sales people, they can be upstairs in the offices, better work environment, they can be more efficient, they'll have new computers that, all that wires that go in there, whatever that, it's like, I guess it's low voltage. So that'll enhance their work environment. It'll allow for a first floor to have a bigger, better showroom, better customer seating, a lobby, new restrooms, just a better experience for the customers. And then the big change, to the extent there's a change, is instead of building a second level of parking above that depression, that'll be all enclosed, which I think will be an enhancement, because now, if you can see from the old pictures, if you look at that depression, you see the stored vehicles from the outside. Well, that's going to be all enclosed, and then the second story will have these new service aisles, service bays, and it'll be modern, state-of-the-art. And then that whole second floor will be connected to the parts department and over to the administrative building. So it'll all be a nice flow on one level. And then there's that outdoor drive aisle that goes from the old service bays, which will stay there, out to Main Street, and that will be largely covered now. So we think that'll be another enhanced aspect from the street view. And so really the project is, as we look at it, is kind of modernizing and urbanizing this car dealership that's been there for a long time in an old, kind of a little bit rundown building. I think Subaru's done an excellent job of keeping it looking good for what it is and how old it is. But the view, as you've seen from our presentation, and you have, I think, some material we submitted with some renderings, it's going to be a nice, modern, clean look. And part of that is driven by customers. The customer wants that experience, and that's tracked in the industry. Every time you go to college, I don't know if you've been there recently, they send you something saying, please tell us about your experience. Well, that's not just for show. That actually goes back to the manufacturer, and it goes to Mr. Jones, and they take those comments seriously in how they can improve the service. So that's one thing it's going to do. It's going to allow a better employee experience, not only from the ease of doing their job, but from safety. The new service bays are going to be the modern, state-of-the-art equipment. It's going to allow the service technicians to work efficiently, safely, provide great service. Customers want their cars, and we all do, I guess. We want them in and we want them out the same day, if possible. And so that's what that's what that'll help do. And then from the outside, this modernization, if you've seen our renderings, we really believe it's going to create a much better pedestrian experience in the neighborhood. It's going to have the new sidewalks will be there. Your site plan criteria has a lot of landscape requirements, so that'll all be upgraded. ADA corners will be put in. So we think overall it's going to be a wonderful project for both Oregon City and Lithia as they continue this great relationship that you've all had since 2002. Now, the legal issue, since I am a lawyer, I should probably talk a little bit about the legal issue, and that is what we're proposing with some added service bays and a little bit bigger part department, is that an intensification or expansion of the use? And the way we look at it is the same way your staff looks at it, is an intensification or an expansion really is when you add to the use. So if we were adding a new element to the business, car rental in a new building, or we were adding a different type of service, that might be an expansion or intensification. But just increasing the ability to serve the customer, we believe is not an intensification or expansion. And in 2014, for example, there was a small detailing shop in the back, and we came in with an application to dramatically expand the building. And all that did was really provide a better opportunity to get the customers' cars in and out faster, do a better job. And so we kind of look at these service bays as kind of similar. It's the same service, just better, and it'll allow for a better service. And you know, if you think about a non-conforming use, any time a non-conforming use would do anything that would help it build its business, like a restaurant gets new equipment or something like that, or a new chef, for example, you're going to see perhaps a little bit more business, right? And we don't think you can measure expansion by the fact that maybe more customers will come, because that would kind of eliminate any non-conforming business from improving. And that's really all we want to do, is improve the service, improve the community service, and the customer satisfaction. So we really strongly encourage you to adopt your staff recommendation. The conditions are very reasonable, and Lithia has no problem with them. And so unless there are any questions, we'd respectfully request that you please grant our application and move on to the site plan review.
Commissioners? Any questions?
I have some thoughts to share, but I have nothing for the applicant.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anybody else?
Quick question. The additional enclosed storage for the fleet, that's equivalent to what you have on site now, right? You're just proposing to enclose it.
It'll be enclosed in, it'll be cleaner, it'll be nicer, obviously upgraded, but yeah, it's going to be the same use that we're making of that area now.
Yeah, cool. Thank you.
Commissioner Stoll?
No questions.
Commissioner West?
Yeah, I had one a little bit for staff here. So if we approve this tonight, does this set a precedent for, or does it set a policy for what no intensification or expansion is with any other non-conforming business?
No, and what you can do as part of your motion, you can be very specific, even though it is part of the staff's findings and it will be in the notice of decision, that this is based on this individual proposal. And is not, the zone change is not does not change, a policy. It is this specific proposal and the interpretation thereof based on the package you saw in front of you.
Thank you.
And I may be accused for not have done all my homework, but I'm just wondering if there's anything in the code that talks to limitations on the physical expansion of a building.
No.
Okay.
We don't in Oregon City. Some jurisdictions have like a specific metric. We do not, which is great, but it also means when there are questions, we get to send it to you because you get to use that subjective analysis.
Yeah, because usually you have something that, if it increases the floor area by 50%, or you're demolishing more than 50% of the wall area or something like that, then everything goes back to what the code says today.
No,
if it's non-conforming and you've got a setback that's, 4 feet instead of 5 feet or whatever. But in this case, that's not, to clarify, that's not what we have. Mm-hmm. We are really looking at the intensification of the use. And the argument is whether or not there is, is Lithia Subaru expanding to accommodate additional use, which, I'm sure that they will, but, companies want to have more business, but are they expanding to just accommodate the existing business at this discrete moment? And it sounds like that's all they're doing. They're building around what it is they're currently doing.
And I think the key thing is, I don't think I said this explicitly in the presentation, but the site plan design review standards are for commercial uses. This is not, So the idea is, and I think the logic is, this development is built. One day, there may not be a car dealership, but what was built was for a commercial standard. So it's not like you're building a custom-built industrial silo or something where they couldn't bring a new use back in. That they are meeting our commercial site plan design review standards for our mixed-use downtown area.
Yeah, and then I also echo Commissioner West's concern about, any kind of situations that we could put ourselves in further down the road when we look at precedent, because when we make a determination on, that does kind of echo down the road for other future non-conforming uses as well.
And part of your deliberations, if there's specific pieces of the finding that you think are very relevant to the Planning Commission's decision, that's something you can kind of put in your motion, and I can add that to the notice of decision, which we did in 2018. But if there's something that you really want to, identify that's part of the Planning Commission's decision. But it is based on just this proposal, and really is not precedent setting for anything else, because you're looking at a specific proposal.
All right. Commissioner LaSalle.
In my opinion, this does not constitute an expansion or intensification of use. The new building addition or renovation is aesthetically pleasing.
Yeah.
And I don't think it would increase traffic, and improves the use of the facility for better customer service. I'm in favor of the approval of the application.
So that sounds like deliberations, and I just want to make sure that everybody has a chance to, I want to make sure there's anybody from the neighborhood association that is here that would like to testify, or anybody that would also submit any testimony. I haven't received any speaker slips. It doesn't appear that there are any, so I will close the public hearing and open for deliberation on the part of commissioners. Anybody? Yeah. Commissioner Splotnoffer.
Okay. I think everything's been pretty much covered that I'm about to say, but I did want to share my personal thoughts. So the question was, the proposed improvements, is that an expansion or intensification? Well, I don't think that modernizing a building, even rebuilding part of a building or adding on to a building guarantees more business. I mean, you could lose business tomorrow. I mean, there could be a big downturn. Maybe they jack up our interest rates. What I see as an expansion is, let's say you're a tool room and you have a couple of grinders. You decide to go into punch presses. You add 5 punch presses. That's a completely different market. It's a different amount of noise. Or for a car dealership, you could add a body shop, which, that's definitely going to increase the business or an expansion of the business. It's going to smell. But just a business that's been around for 30 years is probably making more money than it did 30 years ago, and we can't say that was an expansion. That's just how things go over time. So I see no problems with this. I see a business trying to, improve a building, make it look better. It's going to definitely streamline their efficiency. They'll be able to get cars in and out faster if there is more cars, or if not, it's at least going to give them more room to work where they're not juggling the cars around. Again, not an expansion or an intensification. So I agree with it 100%.
I was just going to say, I agree with what the commissioners just said. I really appreciate the fact that you guys are trying to modernize the business in downtown Oregon City. I hope it does bring more business. I was going to put a plug in for maybe a 3rd floor with the rally car experience, if you want to keep going. But yeah, I really appreciate it, and I agree. I don't think it's an expansion or an intensification.
Thanks, Commissioner Gall. Commissioner Laws?
Chair SB?
I'm sorry?
Can I speak?
Yes, of course. I was just calling on Commissioner
So
Laws.
I haven't used Zoom for a while. I was trying to figure out how to raise my hand.
Okay.
So I agree with everything that everyone else has said, and I really think it's going to be, or my only addition would be, it's going to be a nice boost for our north end of downtown. I think it's really an improvement for that area, and I'm looking forward to it.
Thanks, Commissioner West. Commissioner Laws.
One thing that I can see for an improvement as well is obviously there's a struggle with parking around, and they already have, issues, they're doing their best that they can, and there's a bottleneck as there is with service. So if they have more room for service and can expand, it's just going to be overall a quality experience, which will also help our North End district. So I see it as a very positive thing. And then obviously, as Commissioner West said about aesthetically pleasing, it's going to improve that area, and that area, of course, needs improving.
And finally, I'll go ahead and repeat that this is really just a physical expansion for an existing level of use. So I also support. Would anybody like to make a motion?
Oh, we have
I'm sorry.
Commissioner,
Are we,
Commissioner Stone.
Is there some, Commissioner Stoll?
I have nothing to add that hasn't already been said.
I'm sorry.
Thank you, Bill.
Yes. Now I'll call for the motion.
I'll make a motion. Hope we got the right, what?
Do you want to bring up, sorry,
What are we doing?
I was going to,
Oh,
it's okay. You don't need it if you can read it from the, there we go.
Yeah, does the.
okay.
Yeah.
So it's going to be unmodified. So, motion to approve GLUA-23-00038, LN 23-00005, CI-23-00001 with the conditions recommended by staff.
I'll second that motion.
And the roll.
Commissioner LaSalle,
Aye.
Commissioner Schlagenhofer,
Aye.
Commissioner Laws,
Aye.
Commissioner Dole,
Aye.
Commissioner West,
Aye.
Chair Stoll,
Aye.
Vice Chair Espy.
Aye.
Can I say something? I just want to say thank you for bringing that up so I could read it with staff recommendations. Made it way easier. Very good. Thank you.
Okay, so we have the next item on our agenda. We have a discussion topic. This was up on our last meeting. This is the annual report for the City Commission of the Planning Commission activities in calendar year 2023 and presentation of the 2024-25 work plan.
Yes, I have a brief presentation just to kind of go through all the work that you did last year, and then we can talk through the work plan a little bit. And Vice Chair Espy has agreed to present this to the City Commission tomorrow night during a work session. I don't know that it's a requirement, but it's a tradition, and I think it's important for all of the boards and committees to report out to the City Commission. And usually we do that in the spring, either the first quarter of the calendar year or kind of spring to report out the last calendar year. So the Historic Review Board has presented at the last meeting, and the Natural Resource Committee, that one's coming up. We don't have that one yet. Library Board presented, so we're just kind of going through all the various boards and commissions. So you all actually did quite a bit. It may not have been, it didn't have as many fireworks, I'll say, as the year before when Commissioner Schlagenhofer was chair and kind of working us through some long meetings. But last year we had a couple of presentations, and you can, yeah, next slide. sorry. And yeah, go ahead, keep going, one more. All right, we'll land there for a minute. So similar to what you all had at the beginning of this year, there was a legal training from Carrie Richter. And that's how we kick every year off. And I think it's just a good reminder for everybody, and especially when we have new folks, of just how our process is supposed to work. And you all have very important positions, and so it's important that those refreshers are kind of fresh in your mind about ex parte and bias and those kinds of things. So we started with that. We had DLCD staff come talk to us about some of the housing-related statutes and some of the legislation, I think, that was in the legislation or being worked through at the time. So that was in the spring of 2023. And then towards the fall, the later part of the year, Carrie and I gave then an update on what actually got passed in the legislature, what affected us. And then you started receiving some updates about the McLaughlin Boulevard Enhancement Plan, and that will continue. You'll get some more of those coming up this spring, I think through the spring, probably not into the summer, I think just in the spring. We'll see how things go. You also spent quite a bit of time at the beginning of last year discussing middle housing. So middle housing code was actually adopted, if I'm remembering right, I think it was June of 22 that it got adopted. And then we talked about additional things that you might have been interested in kind of in fall of 22 and beginning of the calendar year 23. So there were things like what we ended up talking about, I think, driveway locations, and we made some changes, but some of the discussion topics were also about affordability incentives, tiny homes, RV occupancy, and micro shelters. And you all had a joint commission meeting with the City Commission to talk through some of those things. And then for the action items, there's actually quite a bit that happened. Again, we did some middle housing work. We changed some setbacks in the commercial district. We kind of made some tweaks, which we knew were going to happen once we started trying to implement middle housing, and we'll probably continue to see that a little bit. But we changed some setbacks in the commercial district. I think it was mostly the mixed-use commercial district. We limited the number of townhomes that can be achieved through a middle housing land division rather than a regular subdivision, so that limit is 4. And then added the ability for the number of driveways that attached units could have. Then you reviewed the mixed-use corridor zone district and made a legislative recommendation to allow outdoor storage. So that was associated with the PGE site. And so that outdoor storage is specific to a utility, and it has to go through a conditional use permit. And at this point in time, we haven't heard from PGE about a conditional use permit, but that would be coming back to you. And you also heard about the Oregon City Loop Trail and made a recommendation on that. And there were several variances that went through for a 10-lot. One was for a 10-lot townhome subdivision on Pleasant. And I don't know if you remember that, but there were a couple of townhome lots kind of in the middle of the development that were a little bit smaller than what could be allowed. There was a variance to the Chase Bank and where they located their main architectural entry. And then there was a variance for a garage setback on Jackson Street that, because of the slope of the yard, if they pushed it back to meet the setback, they would have had to excavate a lot of dirt. I don't know if you all are remembering some of these things, but because you did do a lot of work. And then you looked at the master plan for Clackamas Park. So kind of different from the overall city park and rec master plan in general. There was a specific land use master plan for the Clackamas Park plan. So you looked at that as well. So yeah, those are all the activities that you went through last year. And so this year, we'll go through the work plan. I'll go through the work plan, just a little bit of what you all discussed. And I think we can just go to the next slide on this one. So we've gone through this several times, so I won't spend a whole lot of time on this, but I have kept some of the original categories that we talked about. So we'll be talking about employment, land development, and parking dependency through projects that are already underway. And yeah, next slide there. And, can you back up? What did I do with it? Oh, no, that's right. You're right. Go ahead. Sorry. Okay. And so then you were interested in several topics that are classified, or I categorize them as kind of education or interdepartmental coordination. So your number one priority was housing, and specifically looking at how the city can support and maybe incentivize affordable housing. There are a couple other topics in there that I can work on and bringing some information to you. But I did get a chance to talk with the director, I believe her title is Director of Development, Housing Development for the Housing Authority of Clackamas County. And so her name is Devin Ellen. And so she and the executive director for Northwest Housing Alternatives, which is a nonprofit, will come and present to you in June and kind of talk to you about affordable housing. At Clackamas County, I don't know all the services that they provide, but the person I've been talking to is more in charge of kind of the real estate, I believe, acquiring, developing, going through that process. And a nonprofit often will then help run some of the programs that may be within subsidized housing. But I'll let them speak more directly to what they do. So you'll get a presentation on that. You had some questions on how infrastructure can support growth. So I talked with our Public Works Director, John Lewis, and he will also be coming in June. I think I have them on 2 different June meetings, so you have meetings in June. And he'll kind of talk through the higher level approach that the water, wastewater, stormwater, all those master plans, what kind of approach they took to growth. And then, hey, look, you checked off one of your boxes and we got an update on the Park and Rec master plan. But if you want to talk further about that, we can talk to Kendall. I think the other thing to keep in mind with that one is that it will be coming back to you when they're ready, because that master plan, like the infrastructure master plans, they get adopted as part of the comprehensive plan. So it'll come back to you as a plan amendment. You'll make a recommendation. It'll eventually go to City Commission. But I don't think there's really a timeline on that yet. For a while I was thinking it would be sometime in the first part of 2024, but it sounds like they're still doing their public engagement, so it may be a little longer than that. Okay, next slide. Thank you. All right, and then, so you prioritized some of these future considerations for policy direction / code amendments. And one of the things that came out at the last meeting was the desire to talk more about 7th Street and Malala, and then you prioritize kind of the other 2 as lower term priorities. So with the 7th Street Malala corridor discussion, I think what I'd like to do, if this works for you all, is there have been a number of different studies and corridor plans done, adopted, and implemented over the years. And so I'd kind of like to start with that education, which would be helpful for myself as well. What kind of work has been done already in the area. And then one of the ideas that we could possibly talk about that may help to increase kind of pedestrian activity, commercial activity, would be the idea of a vertical housing tax credit. That is something that the city commission will need to give direction on. And I would ask James Graham, our economic development manager, to come talk through that. But that is an incentive to have commercial on ground floors and then residential above. So it's another way to approach it rather than kind of a forceful code approach. But so I'd like to kind of start with those discussions. And tomorrow night, when we talk with the city commission, they can mull over this work plan and give any feedback or direction. In work sessions, they're very careful not to make decisions. And so I don't know that, I'm not sure. I don't think this would necessarily be a decision, but I think they can give some feedback on the work plan. Yeah, so, and that's what will be happening tomorrow, and Vice Chair Espy will be representing you all. Is there any comments, questions?
I saw the Cove mentioned. Is there anything new on the Cove? Any activity?
There is not, no. I think the Cove came up in our work plan discussions as one of the areas that we should look at when we're talking about employment lands. But as far as I know, from a land use perspective, there isn't anything new happening with the Cove. I do know that the Public Works Director and Economic Development are working together, I think, on looking at some different water quality, and I'm probably going to get out over my skis, but they're working together on I think they're doing some water quality assessments, the best I can say.
Does that include an analysis on effects of mental housing? Are they going to do any look at the code on how?
I'm sorry, on the Cove?
Yeah, like the code changes that they're proposing for storm and that kind of thing.
Oh, okay. So just to make sure, I think Commissioner Schlagenhofer was talking about the Cove.
I'm sorry.
The redevelopment area. And you're talking about infrastructure codes and the planning.
I apologize.
No, that's okay. But when we look at those, again, we will, I think, have to include middle housing into the modeling for the infrastructure, for sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
I have a comment. Could you bring it back to the title page, please?
Yeah. Right there?
Yes.
Okay.
If this goes any further than the Planning Commission, I think Commissioner Espy would appreciate
his name is spelled correctly, yes. I just noticed that too. Thank you. I appreciate that. I will get that fixed.
Yeah. I was gonna say something, but.
Good catch.
Oh, gosh. Okay. All right.
Bob.
Good catch. Thank you, Commissioner LaSalle.
My last name has been bastardized often, so.
That's funny.
All right, that is all I had, so, yeah.
Commissioner Stoll, anything?
The work session for tomorrow, is that available to attend on Zoom as well?
Yes, it is.
Okay. Can you email me that link when you get a chance, and I think I can probably, I thought I was going to be on a plane tomorrow, but it's one day later, so I might be able to attend it virtually.
Sure. Yes, I will ask Jacob to send that to you.
Thank you.
That's good. Then Commissioner Stoll can keep me honest. Commissioner West, is there anything you'd like to add?
I have nothing to add, thank you.
Okay. It's hard because I don't see your picture up there. I want to see your picture. Okay, I think that's it.
That is it, yeah. For communication.
There we go.
There she is. For communications, the only thing that I have as at this time, we don't have a meeting for April 22nd. We do, however, have a meeting, most definitely on May 13th. I don't remember what's on the agenda, but I think there's a lot.
And I'd like just to do a little plug for people who are interested in the McLaughlin Boulevard Enhancement Project. There'll be a City Commission work session tomorrow on that, and we're looking for some additional direction related to some technical investigation. I realize Commissioner Dole is not on my newsletter, so I will add you on, but hopefully the other planning commissioners received an update from me. As always, you can watch the work session on our YouTube page, either streaming or archived. And then there'll be an opportunity for the public, the Planning Commission to provide additional comment, and I'll send out a second email after the meeting. Maybe not right after, but, sometime this week.
Very good. Is there any?
And I'd like to thank Vice Chair Espy for stepping in for me last meeting and this meeting. Appreciate and tomorrow night also. Appreciate the help.
I was happy to do it. Anything else for the good of the order? Okay, meeting adjourned.
Thank you.